Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So welcome back to Wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. So we have been on this journey of understanding the practical application of Bhagavad Gita for last many months. We have almost completed our journey two-third. So there are 18 chapters in Bhagavad Gita. So we have already heard and understood the practical application for the first 12 chapters. And we have already started the 13th chapter as well, which is called the nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. This particular chapter in Sanskrit, it is called Kshetra Kshetra Vibhaga Yoga. So it has 35 verses, and we have already heard about the first 12 verses. So we'll try to cover another 12, 13 verses in this session today. Let us see how much we can cover. But of course, because this is Kali Yuga, and in Kali Yuga, our memory is not that great, and we have already taken some break. So I'll just recap the 13th chapter of the first 12 verses of the 13th chapter, little bit more elaborately, uh, as compared to what we generally do in these sessions. So the first section of the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters, we have seen that it is explaining how we can achieve bhakti for Lord Shri Krishna through the process of karma. Then the middle sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita is explaining about bhakti itself, the glories of the Supreme Lord, and the process of bhakti itself. And these last 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, they are talking about how we can achieve bhakti through jnana, through knowledge. And the main purpose of these 6 chapters is how we can create some detachment towards material nature. So if we get detached from matter, then it is easier to also attach to Krishna. If we remain attached to matter, then it will be very hard to also get attached to Krishna. So that is why these 6 chapters in we will see that quite a lot of knowledge which we will try to pull us away from matter is given. So it is just trying to create some detachment. And the process of progress on spiritual path is always like this. There is attachment to Krishna that needs to be created. Also, at the same time, detachment from the matter needs to be created. So, for example, in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada has given us this process based on the scriptures that we should chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So that is to create attachment to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada said that we should read scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. So that is also to create attachment to Krishna. Then we should do deity worship to create attachment to Krishna. We should um, uh, we should offer all the cooking that you do. So all the bhoga items we should offer to Krishna, and then we should have that as prasadam. So that is also to create some attachment to Krishna and also some detachment to from the matter. And the four relative principles that Srila Prabhupada has asked us to follow, that no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, and no intoxication, this is to create some detachment from the matter. So there is this attachment process as well as detachment process, always go hand in hand on all spiritual paths which are there. So similarly here as well, we see that this entire process of Bhagavad, like the entire scripture is given very briefly, like condensed version is given. So all of that is given for us to create attachment to Krishna as well as to create some detachment from the matter. So when we started this section, 13th chapter or this jnana section, The first verse itself is quite heavy. Arjuna asks 6 questions to Krishna, and they are quite complicated questions. He is asking, I want to know about Prakriti, I want to know about Purusha, please tell me about Kshetra, Kshetrajna, then what is Jnana, and what is Neya. So all of these terms itself are quite complicated. And when Krishna starts explaining them, then they become even more complicated to understand. So we have tried to explain that in the last session as well in a little bit simpler way. I hope that was useful. And we will just briefly see them now. So when Arjuna asks these 6 questions, Lord Shri Krishna starts answering by saying, he first talks about what is Kshetra. Kshetra means what is the field of our activity. So Krishna says that the field of our activity is this body. So using this body, we are trying to achieve everything, like whatever material or spiritual success that we want to achieve, we can achieve using the kshetra which is given to us, or the body which is given to us. Then he answers the second question, who's the kshetrajna? Who's the knower of this kshetra, or who's the knower of this field? So he says there are two knowers of the field. One is the soul, Atma, which is there in this body. It is the knower of this body. But there is another greater knower, which is who is the Kshetrajna, who is the super soul, the Supreme Lord. He is the knower of all the bodies. The soul is only within this body, like I, as a soul, I am in this body, so I am aware of this body. But I am not aware of, say, for example, Mahendra Prabhu's body or Sadashiv Prabhu's body. So the soul within that body knows about that body. But the super soul, the Paramatma, is within all the bodies. Within all the bodies as well as within all the matter which is there. So inside and outside, the soul knows everything and everything. So that means he's the knower of all the kshetras. So he is also kshetrajna. So so kshetra is the field of our activity, which is this body. Kshetrajna means who's the knower of this field. So there are two knowers, the soul and the super soul. Then what is jnana? That is the third question Krishna is answering. So there he said, jnana means knowing the field and the two knowers of the field. So if we know the body, soul, and the super soul, then that is knowledge. So the knowledge consists of these three things. And we were talking about in the last session that most of our knowledge in the material world is only related to a particular part of the matter. It doesn't talk even about the subtle matter which is there, like mind, intelligence, and ego a lot. Forget about talking about the soul or the super soul. So we are only getting a very limited knowledge in this material world. And that is why the scriptures are focusing more on the spiritual knowledge. So then Krishna starts talking about giving this more knowledge about the field. So he says that this body is created of 24 elements or 24 components. There are 5 great elements, then the 5 sense objects, then 5 senses, which are 5 working senses, and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. So these become 20. Then there is mind, intelligence, and ego, 23. And then the 24th is the unmanifested material modes, the 3 modes. So that becomes, which is called pradhan. So the 24 things. And he talks about 6 interactions of matter, which is desire, hatred, happiness, distress, life symptoms, and convictions that we have. Anyway, there are a lot of things that we talked about in that first session on the 13th chapter. I'm only briefly talking about it. If you want to know more, then the video was posted a few days ago on the session on the group as well. So please have a look at that video. Then Lord Shri Krishna talks about the process of knowledge, and he gives 20 factors or 20 points. And out of those 20 points, the 2 factors were very, very important. And they were approaching a spiritual master and engaging in devotional service. So these two factors were the most important of the 20 factors that we saw. And the process of knowledge which was given, the main purpose of that process is to get out of the entanglement. We are entangled in the kshetra. The kshetradna, the soul, is now stuck, is blocked in this body. So the process of knowledge is mainly focused on how the soul can become free from this cage, how it can get liberated. So that is the focus of these 20 points which were given. So if we develop those 20 qualities or 20 points which were given, there are some qualities, some actions that we have to do. So if we do that, then it will help us to become free from this cage of the kshetra. So this is what we have seen till now. And now we will start looking at from verse number 13 onwards. So 13.13. Are we all ready? 13.13. So the first verse here, 13. Neyam yattat pravakshami yajñatvaamritamashnuते anadi mat paramam brahma na sattanna saduchyate. Who wants to read the translation today? Yes, Parminder.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, done with now.
Done.
I shall now explain the knowable, the knowing, which you will taste the eternal, Brahman, the spirit, the beginningless and the subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So from this verse number 13 to 19, Krishna is going to actually answer another of Arjuna's question. So Arjuna asked, what is Neya? Neya means what is the object of knowledge? So what is the difference between knowledge and object of knowledge? So knowledge is the knowledge that we are acquiring, of course, the knowledge that is there. But what is the purpose of acquiring that knowledge? That is also important. For example, I think we talked about that in the last session as well, that many people want to become an engineer or doctor, but their purpose mainly is to earn some money. So the object of knowledge that they are acquiring into their college or universities is not to become like the engineering knowledge or the medical knowledge and to serve the people or to do something. But their main purpose is generally to earn money. So that is their object of knowledge. So knowledge is the medicine or engineering knowledge that they are receiving, but the object of knowledge is to earn money in most of the cases, right? So that is the difference between a knowledge and object of knowledge. So Krishna is now explaining in these 7 verses from 13 to 19, that what is the real object of knowledge. Now there as well, he answers that there are two objects of knowledge. One is the soul and the second one is the super soul. And the super soul is the real object of knowledge. Soul we have to still understand, but the real object of knowledge for all of us should be the super soul. In the first verse, like this 13th verse that we have just read, there he is explaining the soul as the object of knowledge. And what he has said. So there are, as I explained, there are two objects of knowledge. The first verse here, the 13th verse explains that the soul is the object of knowledge. And then from 14 to 18, Krishna talks about the super soul as our object of knowledge. And here in this particular verse, it is mentioned that this soul, I shall now explain the knowable, which is Neya, knowing which you will taste the eternal. So first of all, before even explaining who's the Neya or the knowable, Krishna is explaining what is the benefit of knowing that object of knowledge. So Krishna is saying that if you know this object of knowledge properly, then you will taste the nectar, you will taste the eternal. So that means you will get liberated, you will get free from the entanglement just by knowing about this. Then he starts explaining the Brahman. So the Brahman, which is the spirit, which is beginningless. So that is the quality which is mentioned, that it is beginningless. But the other quality which is mentioned is it is subordinate to me. Because the Brahman can refer to both soul and the super soul. But why we are saying that this verse is talking about the soul is because Krishna says that this spirit is subordinate to me. That is why we understand that Krishna is not talking about the super soul because super soul is not different from Krishna. So he wouldn't have said that it is subordinate to me. He would have said that this is me. But here it says that this verse is saying that it is subordinate to me. That means it is talking about the soul. So first object of knowledge is mentioned here that the soul is the object of knowledge, which is beginningless and subordinate to the Supreme Lord. And by knowing it, we will taste the eternal. Is that clear? Okay. Let us go ahead to verse number 14. Sarvata panipadam tat sarvatokshi shiromukham sarvata shrutimaloke sarvam avritya tishtati. Yeah, Mahendra Prabhu, please go ahead.
Prabhuji. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything.
Thank you.
Pervading everything. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So more like from here, this verse onwards, now super soul is being explained. So here are all these qualities that of super soul that we are going to see, and the numbers in the bracket are talking about the verses that we are seeing. So this verse is talking about how this Neya, the second Neya, super soul, is all pervading. And interestingly, it is explained in in an interesting way that everywhere are his hands and legs. So if it was talking about the soul, then it wouldn't have said like this. Because, for example, I'm sitting here in Woodridge in Wellington. So my hands and my legs are here where I'm sitting on this chair. They are not in UK where Shanti Mataji is sitting. There the legs and hands are her own. My hands and legs are here. But here it is mentioned that this particular name, which is all pervading, the hands, legs, face, heads, eyes, and ears are everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So what it means that there is nothing that the super soul doesn't know. You can hide and do some activity and thinking that no one knows about it. But rest assured that super soul knows about it because the super soul has his hand, legs, eyes, heads, faces, and ears everywhere. It knows everything. So we can't avoid uh, the reactions of our karma that we are doing because soul knows, super soul knows what you have done. Of course, the soul also knows because that is yourself. So you know, and the super soul knows what you have done because the super soul is all pervading. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport gives an analogy, that analogy of the sun to explain how the super soul is all pervading. He explains that just like the sun is there at one place, but everywhere you go, everyone says that, oh, sun is on my head. So sun is actually at one place, but everyone thinks that, oh, sun is here because it is all pervading. So that is how the super soul is actually at one place. It is in our heart, but it is not like distributed. It is not that there is a cake which now cut into 20 pieces and put into each person's plate. So the cake is finished because now the cake is distributed into 20 plates. It is not like that. The super soul is not like that. Super soul is like the sun, where he's there, but he's pervading everywhere. So that is this was talking about. Let's go and see what further information is given about this second object of knowledge, which is super soul. सर्वेन्द्रिय गुणाभासं सर्वेन्द्रिय विवर्जितं asaktam sarvabhruchaiva nirgunam gunabhoktru cha. Yes, Vibhor Prabhu. Please go ahead, and then Surananda Prabhu, and then Kalakali Mataji and Prabhuji ke Sevakraj Prabhu can do.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji. The super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he is the master of all modes of material nature. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So here it is mentioned that how the super soul is transcendental. Now, this is also creating a difference. Like, for example, it is mentioned that he is all pervading, but we are not all pervading. The soul is not all pervading. Now, here it is mentioned that the super soul is transcendental. Of course, the soul is also transcendental, but the difference is that we get controlled by the modes of nature. Whereas the super soul or the Supreme Lord is the controller of the three modes. So the Sattva Gun, Rajogun, and Tamogun doesn't act on the Supreme Lord because they work under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Whereas we get entangled and controlled by these three modes. So it is said that he transcends the mode of nature. So all these three modes, he transcends. He's beyond these three modes. And at the same time, he's the master. So he is controlling those three modes. And earlier it is mentioned that he is the origin of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. So this is quite interesting, the second point which is mentioned. If we can see that anything that we start maintaining, for example, we stay in a house and we start maintaining that house. And as soon as we have spent some time maintaining the house, we become attached to it. Or we have some pet. We start maintaining that pet and then we get attached to them. Or we have our children or our husband or wife or friends. As soon as there is some connection that we establish over a period of time, then we get attached to it, all of them. But Krishna is quite interestingly mentioned that he's the maintainer of everyone, but is unattached. So because we have this attachment toward these material things, that is where we become entangled. Whereas the Supreme Lord is unattached, that is why he is not entangled in anything. So unattached doesn't mean that we do not care about things. It is not Krishna is saying that you become unattached means you do not look after your house or you do not look after your children or all the relatives. You have to do your duty, but not in an attached way. Because as soon as you do the duty in an attached way, then you become the receiver of the reaction. Is that making sense? We have seen this before, but I'm just, because there is a break, I'm just trying to touch upon those points that we have covered in the first 12 chapters as well. Any questions or comments till now? No? Okay. So we have talked about how the super soul is all pervading and he is transcendental. Let us go ahead. Verse number 16. Bahir bhutanam acharam charamev cha sukshmatva tat tadvidneyam durastham chantike cha tat.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and the non-moving, because he is subtle. He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all.
Quite complicated and quite contradictory. So he is inside and outside. He is far, far away and he is near to all. So many things which are mentioned. So this is like generally the Upanishads are written like this in a very complicated way and very um, intellectually challenging way that it's very hard to understand. So here it is mentioned that the super soul is all reconciling. He is everywhere. He is outside as well. He is inside as well. And that is true. He's inside as Paramatma and he's outside as well as Bhagwan. So as Sri Krishna, he is always in Vrindavan, Golok Vrindavan. So he's outside. But at the same time, he's inside of us. He is very near to us because he's within the heart. But at the same time, he's far, far away. He's in the spiritual world and we are in the material world. So if we see, even though there are contradictions, that is still true. Then he's subtle and he's beyond the power of material senses to see or to know. So by these material senses that we have, we can't understand and see the Supreme Lord. Many times people say that, oh, show me God. Yeah, even if the God comes in front of you, you will not be able to see him. Because this material, he's all spiritual, and with the material senses, we can't see him. But if he permits by his mercy, then with these material senses also we can see him. So only by mercy of the Supreme Lord, we can see him with these material senses. As Brahma Samhita says that with the eyes anointed with the love for Krishna, then we will be able to see Krishna. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. So that is how we can actually see. Let us move on to the next verse. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktamiva cha sthitam bhuta bhartur cha tajneyam grasishnu prabhavishnu cha.
Translation. Although the super soul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all.
Thank you, Mataji. I think we have discussed most of those points, which is mentioned about how he is undivided. So we talked about that example of cake, where in the material things that we see, that when we divide something, then the original item gets exhausted, like it gets finished. But the Supreme Lord is not like that. He is everywhere, but still he is undivided, like the example of the sun as well that we talked about. Also, it is mentioned that he is maintainer of every living entity, but it is also understood that he devours and develops all. So he develops, maintains, and devours. So creation, maintenance, and annihilation all are coming from the Supreme Lord as here Super Soul. Let's go to verse number 18. Jyotisham api tad jyotis tamasa paramuchyate jnanam neyam jnanagamyam hrudi sarvasya vishtitam. Who wants to read this? Yes, Margi Mataji, please go ahead.
He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge. And he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. So here it is mentioned that the super soul is jnana. He is knowledge, neyam, which is the object of knowledge, and at the same time, he is the goal of knowledge, jnana gamya. So he is everything. So we have to actually focus. He is the real object of knowledge that we have. So if we actually focus all our effort in understanding the Supreme Lord, then everything will be achievable. So he is source of light. So he is the one who's going to enlighten us. He is the source of knowledge and he is the source of enlightenment as well. And this person is not far away from us. He is situated in one's own heart. It is mentioned here that Hrudi Sarvasya Vishtitam. He is sitting in one's heart, so not far away. And he is actually guiding us from within the heart as well. But we are just turning our ears deaf to him. In the beginning, he gives us some instructions. Whenever we are doing something wrong, then there is this call from the heart which comes, no, 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 this is not the right thing that you are doing. The second time as well, you will hear that. Third time as well, we will hear that. But over a period of time, that voice goes fading. It is not that he is going far away, but we are creating a bigger and bigger wall or thick wall between the super soul within the heart and what we are doing. And because of that, we are not able to hear. So this is what is happening. So he's there, he's guiding us, but we are turning a deaf ear to the super soul and turning ourselves into a different direction towards matter, and we are going in that direction. So this is what we have to avoid. Now let us see who can know about this object of knowledge. The real object of knowledge is super soul, right? So the next verse, the 19th verse, is talking about that. इति क्षेत्रं तथा ज्ञानं नेयं चोक्तं समासतः मद्भक्त एतद्विज्ञाय मद्भावाप्योपपद्यते. Who wants to read?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I read?
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowledgeable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you,
Krishna.
Mataji. So here, Krishna clearly explains that who can understand this? He says, my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. So all of these things which Lord Shri Krishna has mentioned, the field of activities, which is the body, the knowledge, jnana, knowable, which is neya, and he has also talked about kshetrajna. So kshetra, kshetrajna, jnana, and neya, the four things that he has already explained. And he's saying that who can understand it is my devotee can understand all of these things that I have mentioned, and that person can thus attain to my nature. So the devotee can understand and can attain to this transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. So this is the knowledge that Krishna has given. So what do we understand? What are the practical things that we have learned from this? That our knowledge mainly should be focused on understanding the Supreme Lord. And as he is the object of the knowledge, he is the real object of knowledge. We try to understand, or we spend quite a lot of many years in our schools, colleges, universities to get some material knowledge. But we should also try to understand the Supreme Lord, because he is the real object of knowledge. And by knowing that real object of knowledge, we can actually get free from this material entanglement that we have, or this kshetra, the body that we are stuck in. We can go beyond that from the material world to the spiritual world if we understand the Supreme Lord. So this is the whole idea that Krishna is explaining this. There are still two more questions that Lord Shri Krishna has not answered yet, which he is going to answer in the next section, starting from verse number 20, and it will go on till 26, which is Purusha and Prakriti. But before we go there, are there any questions or comments that anyone has? I know it is a bit complicated sounding knowledge, but it is quite easy to understand. The words may be a little bit bigger, complicated, but it is only talking about the body, the soul, and the super soul. Only three things. The body is the field, and in that body there are two people who are staying. One is the soul and the super soul. And these three it is talking about. So the kshetra is the body, kshetrajna are the body and the soul and the super soul. Then jnana is to know these three, which we talked about, the body, soul, and super soul. Neya is actually mainly focused on the spirit, the spiritual. And out of that spiritual things as well, the super soul is the real neya, or the object of knowledge. That is what is explained till now. Is that okay? Margi Mataji, you were having some question? Or was that answered?
No, no, Prabhuji. I think I joined little late, or maybe because of this big gap, I couldn't connect this, the object and the near. But I think I will read the purport in detail and then I will ask a question.
Okay, fine. The object of knowledge, as I gave that example, that what is the purpose? Why are we actually acquiring that knowledge? That is that is called Neya. So
Okay.
as we were talking about, if someone is someone is taking actually them some medical knowledge. So the object of knowledge could be that someone wants to serve the humanity by getting that knowledge and then treat everyone. And someone may say that, oh, forget about the treating the humanity. My main purpose is that I want to cure the patients, but through that I want to earn the money. So the object of that knowledge is different from the knowledge itself. Why the someone is acquiring that knowledge? So similarly, like in the spiritual topics as well, like someone is reading Bhagavad Gita, but someone may be thinking that my main object of knowledge is to understand this knowledge and go to heavenly planet. So I want to go to Swargaloka and enjoy. That is my object of, that is the main purpose of my acquiring knowledge. And
That
that is
is near.
possible. And that is possible because you can just do pious activities, because Krishna talks about Krishna gives knowledge about karma. So the karma can be pious karma, the vikarma, which is the karma, which is the sinful karma, which is against the scriptures. And then he talks about akarma. If you do pious karma, then you actually go to the higher planetary system. If you do vikarma, then you go either lower planetary systems or lower species of life. And if you do akarma, then we get liberated, which is the process of yoga, which Krishna has given. Either karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, all of that. So he has given different paths. So depending on what path you choose, you can actually achieve that. So someone reading Bhagavad Gita may have a different purpose, that someone wants to go to heavenly planet and enjoy, which is fine. But someone may have higher purpose. Someone may say that, or someone may have in between purpose, that, oh, this material world is so full of suffering. I just want to, whether I go to heavenly planet or this material world, in this earthly planet, I will still have some suffering. So I don't want to remain in this material world. I want to just get liberated. So there as well, there is a higher purpose than remaining in the material world, but still it is not very pure. We are still talking about ourselves. I want to get rid of all of these suffering that I have. And someone may have higher purpose than that, which is, I want to actually develop some loving connection with the Supreme Lord. And for that, I want to actually come out of this material world and serve the Supreme Lord somehow or the other, in direct association with Him. So if that is the purpose, that is a different purpose. So that is why it is mentioned that you don't have your object of knowledge to be the prakriti or the material nature somehow or the other. Because we can study about this body in detail. Basically, all the elements which are there, like all the topics that we learn about physics, chemistry, biology, all of those are covering this matter. And there is benefit in it. It is not that they are not beneficial, but they will still keep us in this material world. Whereas if you have higher purpose, then we can achieve that higher purpose. Otherwise, we will just remain where we are or degrade ourselves. That is why this object of knowledge is important. Why we are actually studying, or even in fact, any activity that we do, what is our consciousness in doing that activity is very important. We may do the same activity, like different people will do the same activity, but if the consciousness is different, then the result is going to be different for that person. That is why Krishna is saying that have a pure neya, have a pure object of your knowledge. And instead of keeping that object of knowledge to be kshetra, which is the body, or the jiva, which is the soul, have a higher purpose, higher goal, higher object, which is the super soul or the Supreme Lord. And if you keep that as your Neya, then you will progress to a different location. Is that okay? Is that clear about Neya? Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Anyone else has? Okay, let us move on to verse number 20. So from 20 to 26, it talks about Prakriti and Purusha. And the first 4 verses, 20 to 23, actually differentiates and gives some more characteristics about Prakriti and Purusha. So let us look at Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Vidyanadi Ubhavapi Vikaramsha Gunan Shaiva Vidhi Prakriti Sambhavan. Who wants to read? Come on, raise your hands quickly. Yes, Mahendra Prabhu. Then Sadashiv Prabhu and Vibhor Prabhu can do the next.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So Prakriti and Purusha are talked about here. And this first verse is talking about Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. So both are beginningless. So both Prakriti and Purusha are beginningless. Now, interestingly, here Purusha as well, you will understand that there are two Purushas. One is the soul and the second one is the Supreme Lord. Actually, the Jiva or the soul is not the real Purusha. Purusha means enjoyer. Purusha means enjoyer and Prakriti means the enjoyed. So Jiva thinks, like we all think, that we are the enjoyers. And that is why sometimes scriptures also refer to the Jiva as Purusha. But we are not the real enjoyers. The real enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As soon as the Jiva thinks that I am an enjoyer or I am a Purusha, Prakriti entangles that Purusha. So Prakriti is able to entangle us into this material world. That is because we think that we are the enjoyer, we are the controller, and that is why uh, we remain here in this material world. But as soon as we understand that we are not the Purusha, we are not the enjoyers, but the Supreme Lord is the enjoyer, then as soon as we understand that and we start acting in that way, we become liberated from this material world. So this is the idea of this section. So I'm just giving you this preemptive knowledge so that you can now understand these verses which are coming. So this verse is saying that the material nature and this so-called Purusha, the Jiva, living entity, they are both beginningless. Their transformation and the modes of nature are products of material nature. Yes, Pamela Prabhuji, you have a question? Or you want to read? Yes.
I can read as well, but first I have one question.
Yeah,
Prabhuji, if that's
go
okay.
ahead with the question.
Prabhuji, it says material nature is beginningless as well, but material nature, it's like material world itself is like created and destroyed again and again.
Yeah, good question, Prabhuji. So material nature as such is beginningless. It just transforms into different forms. So for example, this house is built around me. But this house, for example, like a big earthquake comes and this a house is broken. But still, this material matter remains, like the wood remains, the concrete remains, or whatever that remains. And then using that, something else will get created. So the material nature as well will just transform from one form to another, but still it is beginningless. It just remains. Just like in our science as well, we have that the energy is never destroyed. It just turns from one form to another, right? So same, which is talking about that Maya or material nature is also beginningless and it can't be destroyed. So when we say that it gets created and annihilated, that means it just changes its forms. So Krishna creates, and when it creates and when he annihilates, actually it just enters into Krishna again. And when it gets created again, then again it emanates from Krishna. You remember we were talking about that Mahavishnu or Karanodakshaya Vishnu is lying on the Karana ocean. And when he's breathing in and breathing out, all these universes are coming from the pores on the skin of this Mahavishnu. So it comes out in a seed form, and as soon as they come out, then they start growing. And when he inhales again, all of these universes are just going in. And we feel that, oh, these are like billions of years that these universes remain. But from our perspective, they may be billions of years. But from Mahavishnu's perspective, he had just breathed once. So he had just inhaled and exhaled, and creation and annihilation has just happened. So these billions of years are just finished for his. So yeah, so the creation and destruction happens in that way that it is not uh, just finishes. It just enters into the Supreme Lord and then again comes out of him. Okay. So we were talking about Prakriti, Purusham, Chaiva. Yeah, so they are beginningless. Let us see now further at verse number 21. कार्य कारण कर्तृत्वे हेतु प्रकृतिरुच्यते पुरुषा स सुख दुःखानां भोक्तृत्वे हेतुरुच्यते.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So now who is responsible for what is explained in this verse. So nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. So Prakriti is cause of all material cause and effects. Any material transformation that is happening, that is coming from Prakriti. But interestingly, any suffering and enjoyment that is coming, that is not coming from Prakriti. It is coming from the Purusha, living entity in this case. So living entity is the cause of the suffering and enjoyment. How is that? It is because of the activities that you do, the actions that we take, and with what consciousness we are taking those actions. Depending on that, we are getting a good reaction or a bad reaction. When we say a good reaction, that means we are getting some enjoyment. When we get bad reaction, we are saying that, oh, we are suffering in this material world. So, but these are not coming because Prakriti is trying to just play with you. No, no. All these reactions, the happiness and distress, is coming based on our own activity only. Of course, Prakriti is facilitating that under the direction of the Supreme Lord, but the origin is the living entity himself. Is that clear? Okay, let us move on. Purusha prakristho hi bhumte prakriti jan gunan karanam gunasangosya satsadyoni janmasu.
The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. So we have already talked about this, that we have been placed in this material nature because we think that we are these enjoyers. And this is the main reason why we are getting trapped in this cycle of birth and death. As soon as we start understanding that we are not these enjoyers, we are not the Purusha, we are actually the just like Prakriti only. That Krishna is supposed to enjoy us. Like we are supposed to serve the Supreme Lord, and that is how we will also get the enjoyment. But as soon as we start thinking that we are the main person, we are the center of the universe, and everything revolves around me, then we get entangled. And then we just do activities in that consciousness. Then, of course, the results are going to come to you. And then as soon as we get results, that means we are getting trapped in this material world. But when we start thinking that we are not the enjoyers, Krishna is the enjoyer, and we start doing activities to please the Supreme Lord, then automatically the reactions are not coming to us. And then we become free from this entanglement. Whereas at the same time, because we are pleasing the master will make sure that the servant is also happy. So that is how the things will work out. So moving to the next verse, 23. Here, various different characteristics of the Paramatma has been mentioned. Upadrashtanumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwarah paramatmeti chapyukto dehesmin purushah parah. Yes, Gita Jayanti Mata. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. So there are so many things which are mentioned about the super soul in this verse. It is mentioned that yet in this body, so till now it was mentioned who's like the jiva who's thinking that he's a purusha. In this verse, the real purusha, real enjoyer has been introduced by saying, yet in this body, there is another enjoyer, another person, a transcendental enjoyer, that is, who's the Lord, who's the Supreme Lord, and he's the Supreme Proprietor, and who exists as the overseer. He oversees everything. And he's also the permitter. Without he permitting, we can't actually get any action done or anything, any result as well. And who's known as the super soul? That is the super soul that is there. So this is the second Purusha, or the real Purusha has been introduced in this verse. Who's the real enjoyer? So what do we understand from this section that we have seen? That if you act imagining that you are the enjoyer, then actually you will not enjoy. You will actually then get entangled in a kshetra, in this body. So this is quite funny, that if you think that you are the enjoyer, you don't enjoy. But as soon as you consider Krishna as the enjoyer and start serving him, you start enjoying. So as soon as the focus on your own enjoyment has been removed, then you start enjoying automatically. But when the focus is on your own enjoyment, you don't enjoy at all. Second point, understanding that the real Purusha is a Supreme Lord, that will help us in using the Prakriti, all these material things that which are there around us. We can utilize that in Krishna's service, and thus we can become free from entanglement. So whatever facilities or whatever material things that we have available, if we start using them in our own service, we don't enjoy. In fact, we become entangled. But if we utilize everything that we have in Krishna's service, then we become free from entanglement and we also enjoy. Quite interesting, isn't it? It is quite paradoxical that if we focus on utilizing everything in our own enjoyment and we think that we are the enjoyers, we don't get any enjoyment and we suffer. But as soon as we start utilizing everything that we have in Krishna's service, we start getting some enjoyment. Is that okay? Any questions or comments? Okay, let us move on and cover next few verses as well. I want to cover 3 more verses. We'll quickly cover them. Let's read the verses and the translations together, and then I will explain a little bit about those. य एवं वेत्ति पुरुषं प्रकृतिं च गुणैः सह सर्वथा वर्तमानोऽपि न स भूयोऽभिजायते ध्यानेनात्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिद् आत्मना अन्ये सांख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन चापरे अन्ये त्वेवमजानन्त श्रुत्वा नेभ्य उपासते तेऽपि चाति तरन्तेव Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha. Who wants to read these three translations? Yeah, Margi Mataji, go ahead and read all three.
One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, and regardless of his present position. Some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. So here the result of knowledge is mentioned in these three verses, 24, 25, and 26. So the 24th verse says that one who understands the Prakriti, Purusha, and their interaction attain the liberation from birth in material world. So what is the use of knowing all of this, which is mentioned earlier as well, but it is repeated here, that we attain the liberation from birth in this material world. So we can come out of this entanglement that we have in this material world, and then we can attain the nature of the Supreme Lord, which will become Sat, Chit, and Ananda as well. So we are already Sat, Chit, Ananda, but we'll realize and we'll become purified to that state. And 25, verse number 25 mentions that we can attain this by various different processes like Dhyana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga. And 26th, then Bhakti is mentioned. That Bhakti is the easiest and the best part to understand this science. That even though there are other paths which are there, but Bhakti is easy. And how? Just by hearing with faith from authorities, we can achieve this. Just by hearing. Shravanam is the first process. We are having this 9 processes of bhakti: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So, sorry, Vandanam. Did I talk about Vandanam? Okay. So there are 9 of those. And hearing is the first one, Shravanam. So hearing, but from whom we should hear? So we should hear from the authorities who are coming in the right disciplic succession. And if we have some faith in that, then it has great potency. We can make a lot of progress just by doing this hearing properly with faith from the right authority. So hearing with faith from the right authority, we can achieve quite a lot of progress we can do on the process of bhakti. So this is what is mentioned till now. Any questions or comments? So I have a simple picture for you, which explains the summary of all the things that we have discussed in 26 verses. So Arjuna asked these 6 questions: Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Jnana, Neya, Purusha, and Prakriti. So basically, it is only talking about these 3 things, which is body or matter, soul, and super soul. Kshetra is nothing but body. Kshetrajna is, there are 2 Kshetrajnas, soul and the super soul. Jnana means to know the body, soul, and super soul. Neya, the object of knowledge, there are 2, soul and super soul. The super soul is the real Neya. Purusha is soul and super soul. Actually, the real Purusha, the real enjoyer is the Supreme Lord Super Soul. But I have put a dotted line because soul thinks, Jiva thinks that we are Purusha. And who's Prakriti? Prakriti is nothing but the material nature. So this is what we have covered in these 26 verses till now. So in a very simple one slide, we can understand this. Any question, comments, realizations, or any summary points that you want to cover? Yes, Surananda Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, the one point I'll take from today is, if you think you are the enjoyer, then you will get entangled and you actually don't get enjoyment. But if you think Krishna is the enjoyer, then automatically you will get enjoyment.
Yes, very good. Excellent. Anyone else has any other points to share? Yes, Parminder Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, it gives summary of Dhyan, Nyan, and the Karma Yoga, but in the final statement, like other chapters, it puts Bhakti as a supreme, and just Shravana can take you to the path of Bhakti.
Very good. Bhakti is the easiest and gives us the highest result. And through very, very simple way, just by hearing with faith from the right authorities, we can make a lot of progress. Yeah. Anyone else has any other realizations to share? Some questions, comments, or even some summary points, what you heard from today that is sticking with you? Yes, Sadashiv Prabhu and Mahendra Prabhu after that.
Yeah, one point I liked really is our knowledge should be focused on understanding the Supreme Lord, because he is the object of knowledge. And whatever the knowledge other than that, we can consider it as material knowledge, because that is taking us to the material world.
Yeah, very good. Mahendra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I like the way you explained that the super soul is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. You've related it to us enjoying our normally material, our house, the way it works for us, things. So that was really good. Something I can remember very easily. That relation. And the last slide is amazing. I guess looking at that one slide, it explains everything perfectly. So that's really good. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else from others, like who haven't spoken yet? Okay, if there is nothing else, then we will pause here for today, and in the next session we will try to complete the 13th chapter. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.